Hello, everybody. Welcome back for another video. I do hope that you're all doing well. I do hope that you all are having a great day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, wherever the heck you might be on this very weird planet. I do hope that it is absolutely fantastic. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already done so, there's a brand new video every single day. And without any further ado, let's jump right into it. This might get a little bit intense. This is a forewarning just because of what is about to be said and what you are about to hear. I feel like this video needs to be prefaced by the idea of, how do I say this? In old school Bitcoin cryptocurrency terms, remember how I told you, and I've reiterated this a couple of times, about who is buying Bitcoin? Why are they buying Bitcoin? Why aren't normal people buying Bitcoin? Bitcoin is made for the masses. This is like, really old school thought, if you will. For a lot of this, it comes down to the original analysts of the day, back in the day, around a decade ago, all believed at some point that Bitcoin was not only going to survive and thrive, but it was basically going to completely decimate every other asset in its path. A part of that does include altcoins as well. One of the major ideas for this has been the amount of capital inflow that we've been seeing rushing into Bitcoin specifically. We, of course, have seen money flowing into Ethereum, XRP, Solana, meme coins, you name it. But there's been something very particular about the money that is just flowing into Bitcoin. One of the ideas at the core from the original Bitcoin maximalists, because we're not talking about Michael Saylor because Michael Saylor believes in banks and all these other things. I mean like purity. Pure original Bitcoin maximalists is this idea that everything, Bitcoin will create a black hole into which everything is absorbed, including other coins. The idea was that we heard back in 2017 when this news was far more prevalent and we had far fewer coins in the market, was that at some point Bitcoin's price would reach a fever pitch. Bitcoin's price would go so high that other people would simply go, I should have gotten some. And then they'll start to sell off other assets to be able to buy some Bitcoin. This creates a knock-on effect similar to what we've been seeing about countries getting in. Every time I tell you, whenever you hear that a country, a corporation, an institution is buying $17 billion worth of Bitcoin, $4 billion worth of Bitcoin, $800 million worth of Bitcoin, and that money isn't going into gold, isn't going into equities, isn't going into the stock market, isn't going into real estate. It's sending a message that there is a belief that this new system could potentially do something in the long term. Do you understand that? Like, every dollar that goes in is a dollar that could have gone to another investment. And now that we're hearing from governments, and I have to say BlackRock, it shows that a huge shift is happening. However, the core idea from all of this is, as Bitcoin maintains its course to $1 million, when we get to $1 million, Bitcoin becomes something else. It's no longer just a digital currency. It becomes a real strong investment. If you hold on to it, you are a millionaire, the thing that everyone is striving to become. If Bitcoin goes to $7 million, you've missed out. You have to, at that point, sell something to be able to buy some fragments of Bitcoin. The news that we keep getting is that there's not a lot of Bitcoin left. And I know there's cynics out there, and I've seen your comments before and your blah, 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 all these other things. But you will understand when it happens that you've missed out, that you waited too long, that the dips in price you were hoping would be there did not actually transpire. Especially as we keep hearing that this company has 600,000 Bitcoin. That company has 700,000 Bitcoin. This company's raising money to buy 210,000 Bitcoin. If 3 companies alone, 3 companies this year buy the Bitcoin that they want, there will be nothing left on cryptocurrency exchanges. You need to really understand what's happening to get the full scope of the world that we are walking into. A provocative post published on the 14th of July by long-term Bitcoin advocate and someone called Taproot Wizard Udi Wertheimer has ignited fresh debate over whether the cryptocurrency Bitcoin is on the cusp of what he calls a generational run, the likes of which we've never seen. We have heard this from every corner of the Bitcoin space. This isn't like a niche idea. This isn't like maybe at some point. This is one of when you talk about like digital gold, digital this, Bitcoin. So this is the core function of what it is. It's Michael Saylor getting on stage talking about he's expecting a $24 million Bitcoin. It's Cathie Wood adjusting her figures for the next 3.5 years, expecting a $2.4 million Bitcoin. It's the people from Blockstream. It's all these analysts, all these and I say wealthy people expecting a $1 million Bitcoin by this year. When we go over the numbers, and I think that's been I've lived a life where I have been able to easily tell people that something was going to happen. And regardless of when I say it, how I say it, whatever the matter might be, I am always met with some level of skepticism. I assume it's the tone of my voice. I assume it's the way that I look. Maybe it's just my delivery. But when that thing ends up happening, it's like a real shock to people. Wait, you knew what was going on? How's that possible? And it's like, I'm not a genius. I go over the news. If we're having the same news all the time, if we had 3 million Bitcoin on crypto exchanges, if we got news that 1 million Bitcoin left those cryptocurrency exchanges, simple math tells us that's a whole 1 million Bitcoin that's gone. We had news, this was 3 or 4 weeks ago. You can even Google this one. I think it was, what was the time period? Was it a month? I think it was a month. Several 100,000 Bitcoin were bought by institutions in Wales just within that 30-day period. It was an unprecedented amount. We recently had something about the actual inflows for the ETFs. They're literally in the billions of dollars every single day. It's making the news. We've never seen this before. When you put all of this together, it shows a pattern of what these rich people are trying to do. They all have in their charts. The BlackRock does not get into an asset class unless they know they're going to make Bakuda bucks. There's just no way around it. I told you that before when Bitcoin was 15,000. I said BlackRock isn't getting into this space, waiting for Bitcoin to go to 25,000 and go, cool. Okay, cool. We made some money. Let's leave right now. They're in it for millions of dollars per Bitcoin. They're in it to see Bitcoin. This is if you're a true person from the original market, the idea is that Bitcoin at some point will begin to absorb debt. It will absorb everything that has a number. People will be, and I say it this way, the idea is forced to sell other assets. That guy who owns 50 homes, he's going to realize that his homes, they went up in value over 10 years, but they did not do a 25x like Bitcoin did. I'm going to sell 3 of my homes and start buying a Bitcoin. That's another huge chunk that then gets taken off of the market. And that's where we are. And that's kind of the idea of where we will always be. When you've heard me say before, I didn't think we would get here this fast. I assume we had until 2035. No. We're here right now. Writing on Twitter, Wertheimer contends that Bitcoin is emerging from a rare rotation in which early, price-sensitive holders have surrendered their coins to newcomers, chiefly exchange-traded fund investors, corporate treasuries, and even nation states. We've seen that over the last 2 years, who are largely indifferent to the unit price. He said, and I quote, many, if not most of old big holders have rotated out of the asset, he asserted, adding that once such rotation succeeded, what follows is a rally in multiples previously considered unimaginable. We just had Samson Mao. He's a big advocate for the idea of a God candle and an Omega candle. The general consensus around this idea is that the supply of Bitcoin is going to get so thin that we will begin to see people buying $1 million worth of Bitcoin, and then that has an effect on the price. We usually talk about billions of dollars to move Bitcoin's price a bit. It'll dry up so quick that any money put into it is going to have a profound effect on the actual price. If we continue on this journey that we're all here together for, of hearing about these companies and institutions, 800 million, 1.3 billion, and they're happening every single day, the OTC markets are going to dry up. All that's going to be left is to buy spot directly on crypto exchanges. And then somebody, of course, will sit there and go, well, once OTC dries up, they probably just won't buy anymore. Here's the problem. Bitcoin's at $138,000. For example, everything dries up. The next 9 months, Bitcoin's at $274,000. You think the companies are going to go, we can't buy anymore because the OTC market has dried up? No, you're then in a race to try and get as much as you possibly can because you know that the other 380 entities are also trying to buy the exact same Bitcoin that you are trying to buy, of which there is not enough of because there's no new Bitcoin entering the market except for when retail sells because they get impatient or whatever the actual case might be, and then the institutions end up buying. It's just the loop that keeps going on, but we've gotten to the point where Bitcoin's no longer at $8,000. Bitcoin's not at $15,000. Bitcoin's not sitting at $27,000. And we're like, well, I hope something happens. We are rocketing towards $250,000 per coin. Like, this is big boy money now. This isn't like remember how I told you before, we've moved on from the idea of Bitcoin as some sort of speculative asset. I know it sounds weird, but every asset is speculative. When you get to the point where governments are buying you over gold and real estate and, bonds from other countries, when we hear about the rapid de-dollarization, when we hear about all these mega companies and these CEOs being like, yeah, we're slowly rotating out of US securities and we're going to be putting our money into Bitcoin. We're selling, all the profits that we make from our gold and silver, we're going to be using it to buy Bitcoin. All the money that we're making from our real estate, what was that guy's name? Cardone? A week ago, announced that all profits that he makes from his massive real estate empire are going to be rotated into Bitcoin. And they have no intention of selling. This is what big money is. When you have $100 billion and you have $3.4 billion worth of an asset, you sit there and you wait The problem is that the waiting will go on forever. Because as Bitcoin goes higher up in price, you are less incentivized to sell it. Bitcoin's at 840,000. We know it's going up to 900,000. When Bitcoin's at 900,000, you know that 1 million is next. When it's at 1 million, let's see 1.15 million. You can stake your Bitcoin. You never have to sell it. You lock it away into a protocol. Guess what? You're making $30 million a year and you haven't sold any Bitcoin. How much higher is your stock price going? The 30 million that we made from staking, we're going to be using 28 million to buy more Bitcoin and 2 million for company operations. Next year, you do the exact same thing. 2032, the amount of Bitcoin that comes out of the mining is less than a Bitcoin. It is just in Satoshis. Did you think all these companies and all these governments like just randomly tumbled into Bitcoin? If we know the numbers, they know the numbers. Never forget that. A lot of times in crypto, people will assume that because we get the news that we're kind of at like the forefront. That's partially true. We are ahead of billions, 8 billion. Think about that. We're ahead of 8 billion people right now in this market. 8 billion. However, even more ahead of us are the people who are making these big buys. Remember, I told you, how do you go? All these companies, we're going to buy 1 million. We're going to buy 3 million. We're going to buy 7 million. Next week, we're trying to raise $350 million. And I was like, that's a heck of a jump. Now they're talking about billions of dollars for their purchases. Do you think they like the sound of Bitcoin as they say it? Or do you like the sound of the money that's going to be hitting their bank account? Wertheimer frames his case through an exhaustive retrospective on Dogecoin's 2019 to 2021 ascent, arguing that Bitcoin now occupies an analogous position. He recounts how on April 2019, a tweet from Muskie triggered an initial 50% spike that lulled veteran traders into distributing their bags, only for TikTok-driven retail inflows to drive the meme coin from roughly, it was less than 1 cent to nearly $1 within 2 years. I think the highest they got to was 70 cents. There's now all these predictions of a $3, $4, $5 Dogecoin, but I would hold my horses there. He said crypto natives thought they knew it was a huge deal, but they underestimated it by a lot. He wrote, describing the move as the first Dogecoin, can't say that word, followed by an even larger second, can't say that word, once legacy sellers exhausted their supply. Transposing that template onto Bitcoin, Wertheimer insists that the real move didn't even start yet. That a lot of the analysts you've seen the last couple of weeks in the news, these people are all saying, I'm telling you, they're all talking about $250,000 per Bitcoin and potentially $500,000 per Bitcoin by the time we get to the end of this year. I think a lot of the movements, and I say this from my perspective, I think a lot of the movements we've seen in prices have been huge amounts of manipulation. Making sure that things go sideways, that this doesn't happen, that doesn't take place, especially as we've been talking about this since the actual beginning of the year. It's done, of course, to make sure that you can accumulate at much lower prices. I will say, I am looking forward to, personally, the future where we can actually see if all these people were correct. Because all the price predictions for the next now to the next 3.5 years are all insisting that either the cycles are broken and $1 million Bitcoin. Going to $1 million and prices won't ever dip like they previously did before, which also would make a lot of sense in this narrative with everything that we have going on. He claims that traditional capital market participants, embodied for him by BlackRock's iShares and Michael Saylor's MicroStrategy, are blind to earlier cycle highs because they measure performance from the January 2024 ETF launch or in dollar notional terms. Referencing IBIT's surge from $30 to $70, Wertheimer said it's only up $40. That's nothing. Why not 700? They're completely insensitive to Bitcoin's price. He added of treasury-based buyers arguing that such entities simply shove as many dollars as they can. On price targets, Wertheimer is explicit. He said, and I quote, "I have a high degree of confidence that we'll see 400,000 US dollars per Bitcoin by the end of the year. This target might be too conservative." He further predicted an additional order of magnitude revaluation once the entire world starts to believe. Echoing Dogecoin's second wave frenzy, and once again, he said we're just entering the mind fudge, if you will. The movements of the last 18 months have been quite evident and blatant by these companies and these institutions. They're buying because they want all of it. If you can make sure that you own all of an asset in any capacity before everyone else really pays attention, of course you end up richer, but you also make that asset a lot more attractive for people who are trying to invest. Remember I told you the story. This happened in the late 80s, early 90s. There's a family somewhere in New York. You can Google them. They started putting up posters saying, this is after Andy Warhol passed, "We will buy your Warhol for cash." You must have seen, there have been parodies in movies and TV shows. You might have seen them on the street. Google it. Cash for Warhols, like that kind of thing. This family basically went around because if you, how do I say this? If you got every single person into a room who owned it and then you started buying it from them, they go, "Hey, give me a little bit more." This family went around individually to these people and they were buying Warhols from these people for pennies on the dollar. Something that they bought in the 60s and 70s for $700, they were buying it from them for $14,000, $15,000. These pieces are now worth $23 million. They're the largest holders of Warhols in the world now, this family. This is what I think we've been seeing with Bitcoin. You have to do it in silence. How many times have we had days, weeks, months where the accumulation levels were so insane that we were sitting here like, what is going on with the market? Why isn't the market moving? It doesn't make any sense. You can't have every single day all these companies it's just very sophisticated manipulation. So at this point in the market, like right now, the expectation is that in August, we will be $180,000, $200,000 per Bitcoin. These are the numbers that people are throwing out. A lot of the energy right now is focusing around September and October. This is the kind of the time given that we're being told right now as to when the market's going to like completely go into a frenzy. I do personally think that we are obviously going to see $1 million Bitcoin, but I don't know if it's going to be this cycle. The issue ends up being is that time moves forward. So if it's not this cycle, it's probably going to be the next. We are at a pivotal, that's a great word, a pivotal point in history money-wise. A lot of people are struggling. A lot of people do not have assets. A lot of people don't have jack diddly squat. Understand how early you are in this market and that it's not the end. We have another 115 years before the last fragments of Bitcoin are mined. These companies, countries, and institutions are not only here for 2025, They're here for the long haul. Big money works in decades, not in days. In 2045, Bitcoin is still going to be around, and I can't begin to imagine what its price is going to be. All these analysts since the beginning of this year are adamant that we are going to see $250,000, $500,000, $1 million Bitcoin. And I'm personally waiting for when we actually get those Omega candles, because I know that they're going to come. I know that they're going to be there. It's impossible to have this level of buying. You cannot, ETF issuers cannot buy $1 billion per day and then have an asset's price move nowhere. They're drying up the entirety of the supply. And I do not want any of you in a decade to sit there and see Bitcoin's price at $2, $3, $4, $5, $6, $7 million. And then you go, I wish I had paid attention back in 2025. This is your chance right now. You can literally make generational wealth. This is how it's done. So the rest of the year is probably going to get more crazier. I hope that everyone continues to pay attention. I do sincerely hope that you've all enjoyed. I hope that you all are having a great day, morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, wherever the heck you might be. I do hope that it is absolutely fantastic. Thank you all once again for watching, listening, liking the video, subscribing to the channel, and I hope you all get much richer soon. See you.